What's going on, everyone? So it's looking like we are going to get a Damian Lillard trade with the Portland Trail Blazers headed somewhere by Monday. Media Day is next Monday, and multiple execs don't think Lillard will be on the Blazers Monday's Media Day. It's looking more and more likely that it's going to be the Toronto Raptors. Raptors making Dame progress, and that they believe that they can outbid any of these teams that are in contention for Damian Lillard, the Miami Heat, Brooklyn Nets, teams like that. And the Raptors frontrunners for Dame, two NBA execs believe Toronto enters week as favorites to land Lillard. Now, we've talked about this, right? Damian Lillard on the Toronto Raptors makes sense for all parties involved, right? Very similar to how Miami and Damian Lillard would work. You can make an argument that Toronto would kind of follow the same suit. Right now, obviously, they don't have a Bam Adebayo, they don't have a Jimmy Butler, but they do have a Pascal Siakam, a very nice young player, and Scotty Barnes. Can he take that next step? They have a nice little core. They have flexibility. They have everything that they need to go and acquire Damian Lillard and still maintain a quality roster and still be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. I also don't believe that Toronto, if they were to trade for Damian Lillard, it would be a move to necessarily win this year. See, luckily, the difference between when Toronto kind of pushed their chips to the table and went all in for a Kawhi Leonard, they had one shot. They had that 1 year, and if they didn't get it done, then they knew Kawhi Leonard was leaving and departing. And it worked out, right? They were able to win that NBA championship. When you're talking about Damian Lillard, that's not the same scenario here. Now, could the luck of the dice kind of fall their way? Right? We just saw Miami catch a couple breaks and all of a sudden they're in the NBA Finals. Could something like that similar happen to the Toronto Raptors? It's very possible. We will see what they end up giving up in a deal, but let's say it's a package of like around Gary Trent and OG Anunoby. You would still have Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl. You'd still have Dennis Schroeder. You'd still have Damian Lillard, and then plus whatever else they're able to maintain and keep. I imagine that they end up losing Dick. We'll see how that goes. But regardless, whatever the outcome is, you have a roster that would be good enough to compete, and I think could fall in that like 4 to 6 range. Still think Boston and Milwaukee are going to be the two best teams in the Eastern Conference if Dame was to go to Toronto. But how do the Sixers look? Right? Does James Harden completely try to implode that team? We saw him do it in Houston. We saw him do it with the Nets. Right? Does he kind of try to sabotage that because he wants to force his way out and he kind of wants Daryl Morey to have no choice but to trade him if he wants to be competitive? If that happens, then who knows, right? All of a sudden, it's like Toronto could be right there because Toronto has a lot of the things that Damian Lillard lacks. Toronto needed, just like Miami, that consistent go-to scorer and that consistent go-to closer down the stretch. Toronto needs a lot of those same things. And Damian Lillard will provide that for Toronto. They have the size, they have the defense, they have the switchability, they have the, point forward type guy, right? They have the young, just versatile big man. They have everything that they need to have success with the Damian Lillard. And to me, it would be more so we get Dame now. It puts us in a position to where we can be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. Maybe a couple things fall our way and we're in the NBA Finals. You never know. But if not, we have the core unit in place. And now we're just kind of putting the rest of the puzzle pieces together to finish that championship puzzle. That's kind of how I look at this. Very similar to the same reasons why Dallas went and traded for Kyrie and the Phoenix Suns went and traded for Kevin Durant. It's more so of like, yes, gives us an opportunity, more so the Suns, right? Speaking of the Suns specifically, it's like we go get Kevin Durant. It gives us a chance this year, but it's not about necessarily winning this year. It's next year we can then go and put the pieces to the puzzle to try to be one of, if not the best teams in the league. And then you saw them go get a Bradley Beal, and it's looking like they may end up trading DeAndre Ayton to go get a couple more complementary pieces, and then they go and fill out their roster, and it's like, okay, well now we can go and make that push for title contention and maybe go win that NBA championship. Dallas, I didn't think that they did as good of a job this offseason, but same thinking, right? You go get Kyrie, now you have Kyrie and Luka, and we can start putting the pieces around them to hopefully get in contention. I just don't think that they got enough quality pieces to really put themselves in contention. That's kind of how I look at Toronto. Toronto, you go get Dame. You now have a good enough roster to compete and be relevant in the Eastern Conference. And then next year, because you're not in a rush to immediately have to lose Dame or trade Dame or anything like that, now you can go and put the pieces around Damian Lillard, Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl, Dennis Schroeder, whoever else, right? Scotty Barnes, whomever else is on that roster after this year, and now go into contention. The issue now is if you're Miami, you're in some trouble, right? Because Miami, the problem is that Miami's package doesn't seem appealing to Portland. We've gotten countless reports about that, and Miami's only way to go get a Damian Lillard is to include another team. Where Toronto, they have pieces that make sense, and on top of having pieces that make sense, they can do a deal without having to go and trade with a third team, right? They don't have to go and try to figure things out. They can if Portland wants them to. Like, let's say they're like, hey, we don't really want Gary Trent Jr., try to unload him elsewhere and go get us, a first-round pick or something like that, or go get us another young player that is a perimeter guy or whatever, right? You could do that. They have nice young pieces that appear, based on the reports, seem to be something that Portland is interested in. Get a guy like OG Anunoby that fits. They don't need more guards. They have that. They could use some perimeter guys, a young 3-and-D guy that fits the timeline of their current roster. And then they could still, with the Phoenix Suns, do a deal for Nurk by himself and go get Ayton, right? If you're Portland, I mean, you could end up with a nice core foundation of like Scoot Henderson, Sharp, OG Anunoby, Jeremy Grant, and DeAndre Ayton. It's a really good starting five that's young, versatile, that can be competitive for a long time. If Scoot Henderson evolves into that guy that many people think he will be, then, I mean, they may end up having the next superstar on their hands. DeAndre Ayton's a legit 2010 guy. Now you have that, and you have still nice young core and like Murray, and do they end up unloading Simons, or are they able to keep them, right? Like, they have the pieces that they need. They would have draft picks in the deal. If you do the Miami trade, it's like, what are you getting in that? Right? Like, you don't really have a need for Tyler Hero. Jovic may or may not be something. Jacquez may or may not be something. Like, but they're not really players or positions of need. And on top of that, you could still get, like I said, a Grady Dick and whatever else, right? Flynn and stuff like that, right? Like, there's basically, Toronto very likely will say, take whatever you want that's not named Scotty Barnes and Pascal Siakam, right? Let's keep Pascal, let's keep Scotty Barnes, and then let's go get Damian Lillard. And then you have Jakob Poeltl, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl, and Pascal Siakam with Damian Lillard. You're in a great shape, right? And, I mean, even teams like, Philly, because they have James Harden, can they maybe work something out, right? There's just a lot of teams out there that can put together more reasonable packages than Miami can. You know what Miami's package is. They're limited, right? And if Portland doesn't really value the things that Miami has to offer, Miami doesn't really have many options. Yeah, they could go get a third or fourth team or whatever, but that takes complacency from those other teams. That takes them willing to do whatever it takes to go and help Miami get Dame. And that's putting this together quicker than Toronto, who can just say, hey, take whatever you want. It's yours. Scotty Barnes is the only untouchable. What do you want? You want OG or Pascal? You want OG because it makes more sense because he's younger? Okay, sure, take him. Right? What do you want? They're not going to want Jakob Poeltl. They're not going to want anything like that. So you have a great foundation if you're the Toronto Raptors, and if you're Portland, you basically now have your starting five group for the next 4 or 5 years. You're good. And you'd have a bunch of young talent on the bench and stuff like that. Like, if you're Portland, you're in a great shape, much better shape than you would be with Miami. Because again, what is Miami giving you? Duncan Robinson and Kyle Lowry? Like, that doesn't make any sense for a rebuilding team. 2 first-round picks, it doesn't make any sense for a rebuilding team. Right? Like, and Dame's, he's not a guy that's going to sit out. Like, Damian Lillard's not going to be like, well, you didn't trade me to Miami, so I'm not going to play for you. He's just not that guy. He's not going to force, if Toronto trades for him, he's going to play for Toronto. He's going to play the absolute best that he can and to the best of his abilities for the Toronto Raptors. Because that's who he is as a man, and that's his character. He's shown you that the entire step of the way. He's not going to go and be like, oh, well, you traded everything to go get me and are actively trying to put a contender around me, but I said I wanted the Heat, so get me out of here. And even if he did, all Toronto has to say is, tough, like, not happening. Well, you're just going to sit out and not make, $100+ million over the next 2+ years? No, of course not. So it's just, if Miami is at the mercy of the Toronto Raptors. If Toronto wants Dame, Toronto's going to go get Dame. It's just how it is. They just have a better package that they can put together than the Miami Heat. So we'll see. Time will tell. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? Think he's a Raptor? Think he's a Heat? Love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments.